Welcome to Protecting the Planet. I'm Ben Tracy. It's been a year full of extreme weather around the world. As of October 2023, there have been 24 weather-related disasters in the United States, each with damages exceeding $1 billion. In Arizona, a record-setting and deadly summer heat wave saw temperatures hit 110 degrees on more than 50 days. Recent reports say 202 deaths have been attributed to those sweltering conditions. And scientists say 2023 could be the hottest year on record. California saw its first tropical storm in 84 years, Hillary, which brought record-breaking rain to the Golden State in August. And this year's Atlantic hurricane season has also been unusually active. By early November, the de facto end of peak hurricane season, there were 19 named storms in the region. In years past, it usually takes until mid-November to see just 14 named storms, according to the Center for Disaster Philanthropy. One of those storms, Hurricane Idalia, which pummeled the southern and eastern coastlines, is estimated to have caused $18 to $20 billion in damages. Now, climate change is believed to have made each of these natural disasters worse, and many scientists are now sounding the alarm that we are experiencing what they call a climate emergency. So we'll sit down with one of the world's most famous climatologists, Michael Mann, who's been warning for decades about the impacts of a warming planet. But first, a recent UN report says Earth is experiencing global boiling, and the only way to stabilize the planet's temperature is to stop burning fossil fuels completely. So I sat down with Leah Stokes, a climate policy expert at the University of California, Santa Barbara, to learn more. This summer feels like a page torn from the book of Revelation. The planet's alarm bells ringing all at once. Are climate scientists, climate experts surprised by this?
They've been telling us that this is going to happen. It's definitely, on the outer ranges of what scientists thought would be happening by the year 2023.
Leah Stokes is a climate policy expert at UC Santa Barbara. She says human-caused climate change, combined with a developing El Niño weather pattern that raises global temperatures, is fueling these extremes. What is the climate change connection to a heat wave?
Heat waves are really the easiest thing that we can link directly to climate change. And increasingly, climate scientists are saying, there's no way we would have seen a heat wave like we've been seeing over the last few weeks all across the planet if we hadn't warmed the planet, if we didn't have climate change.
A new report by World Weather Attribution scientists say these once extremely rare heat waves are not rare in today's climate. They warn that unless the world rapidly stops burning fossil fuels, these events will become even more common, occurring every 2 to 5 years.
This isn't like a permanent situation. If we stopped burning fossil fuels, the temperature would start to stabilize. But unfortunately, until we do that, there's a lot of warming in the system and it's going to keep getting worse.
We have already warmed the planet by about 2 degrees since pre-industrial times. We are on track to reach 5.8 degrees of warming by 2100. Scientists say we are still pumping record amounts of carbon pollution into the atmosphere. There are signs of hope. Demand for electric vehicles is accelerating, and renewable energy is more abundant and cheaper than ever. But unless we dramatically cut planet-warming emissions, this record-hot summer might be the coolest one we have left.
I have young children. I have twins under 2. I think they're going to be alive for several decades. So I'm not interested in talking about how it's impossible or how it's not real. It's real, it's happening now, and we know what to do to stop it.
Climate scientist Michael Mann is worried we're running out of time to avoid the worst impacts of climate change. Jeff Glor talked to him about his new book, Our Fragile Moment, and the lessons we should take from Earth's past.
We're sitting here right next to our fossil fuels.
Well, they have a lesson for us. The dinosaurs, didn't see the asteroid that was coming that led to their extinction. They had no agency. They couldn't do anything about it. We don't have that excuse.
Fossil fuels are the leftovers from plants and animals that have accumulated in the ground since life on Earth began. For more than 150 years, they've been our #1 source of energy. Michael Mann says we're burning through them 1 million times faster than they formed.
There's no analog in the past for the rate of warming we're causing today with massive extraction and burning of fossil fuels. And so it's important to recognize what lessons the past can teach us and what lessons maybe they can't. Clams and corals are one of these biological archives that we can use to reconstruct past climate conditions.
The Academy of Natural Sciences at Drexel University has one of the world's largest collections of biological artifacts, which are important to understanding the history of the Earth's temperature.
So these clams can tell us what the water temperature was like, what the conditions were like at the time, hundreds of years ago.
Yeah, exactly. And you get enough of these, and they sample different time periods, and you overlap them. Yeah, this one is pretty.
It's a big clam.
In fact, you can get good exercise.
Yeah,
actually,
yeah, no, it's a nice little. You could do some.
I think Rocky actually used these.
The clams we saw shed light on the last couple centuries. Man's new book, Our Fragile Moment, delves far deeper, going back hundreds of millions of years.
You write that we have thus far found no other planet in the universe with such benevolent conditions. It's almost as if this planet Earth were custom made for us, and yet it wasn't. What does that mean?
Well, Earth has been around for 4.5 billion years. Life has been around for almost 4 of those billion years. We've only been around for, several 100,000 years. It's a tiny sliver. It's the smallest of slivers of Earth history and life history.
A quarter century ago, man introduced the world to this graph, known as the hockey stick graph. Using data from ice cores, tree rings, and coral, man and other scientists say they were able to piece together the climate history of Earth for the past 1,000 years, the first time anyone had done that in such detail. Not everyone agreed.
Suddenly I found myself being attacked by Republican politicians and right-wing news outlets. There were these group of people coming after me.
Why does it seem impossible to separate the politics from the science?
It's a great question. We don't have any trouble with, the science of cosmology and the Big Bang, astrophysics.
But climate?
But somehow, when it comes to climate, there's this huge controversy that swirls around the science. What I would say, and we can see examples of this in the past, for example, the science that told us that tobacco was harmful to human health. There was a huge blowback. The science was solid. The tobacco scientists themselves, in their internal documents, said as much.
I think something that turns some people off is, well, you said 10 or 20 years ago the Arctic was going to be melted by now. And it hasn't happened. So why should I believe all this?
Yeah, fair enough. And there are these caricatures that exist of the scientists and the science and what we said, and there's been a lot of distortion.
You do understand that this is an apocalyptic event. This is a large...
Another type of caricature was of man, played by Leonardo DiCaprio in Don't Look Up, which satirized humanity's inaction in the face of certain destruction.
We really did have everything, didn't we? I mean, when you think about it.
Man says the greatest threat today is no longer denialism, but doomism. The feeling that any steps we take are too little, too late.
Are we more or less screwed than we were 10 years ago?
Well, I'm glad you phrase it that way, because I have colleagues who say, we'll use the F word, we're effed. And my reply to that is, the question is never whether or not we're effed or screwed. It's how effed are we? And what I mean by that is, if you live in Maui, you've already seen devastating climate consequences. If you live in Canada, if you live in California, if you live here in Philadelphia, where we had tremendous flooding, for all of those people, dangerous climate change has arrived. So the question now isn't, are we going to prevent dangerous climate impacts? It's going to be, how bad are we willing to let it get?
You can pick apart the edges of any scientific evidence, but the long-term trend, according to man, is indisputable and as foolish as ever to ignore.
When you hear someone say, drill, baby, drill today, what's your reaction?
If they're talking about ice cores, I say, go do it. If they're talking about drilling fossil fuels, I say, look, the Stone Age didn't end for want of stones. And the fossil fuel age won't end for want of fossil fuels. It'll end because something better has come along.
Yeah.
That thing is renewable energy. And the companies that recognize that are going to be the leaders in the coming decades, and the ones that don't, they're going to go down with that sinking ship.
Coming up, Arizona gets trapped under an unprecedented heat dome. Summer 2023 was Earth's hottest on record, according to NASA. David Pogue took a trip to Phoenix, Arizona to help us understand how heat domes are an increasingly deadly part of life in the desert.
The last 8 years have been the hottest years ever measured on the planet. July was the hottest month ever recorded. July 6 was the hottest day. All over the planet, the heat broke temperature records, including in Siberia, 103 degrees. More than half the U.S. population was subject to heat warnings in July.
Here in Phoenix, Arizona, the heat has broken all kinds of records, including the longest streak of consecutive days where the temperature hit 110 degrees or hotter.
Really cooking today in Phoenix, 118 degrees. I think tomorrow will be even hotter.
And it's not just the hot air that's dangerous, it's the surfaces. This steering wheel, 162.5. This sidewalk is 144 Fahrenheit. That's hot enough to burn your dog's paws in 60 seconds. And this playground slide for children, 182.8 degrees.
People say, oh, you live in Phoenix, it's a dry heat. And honestly, 100, 105 is not bad. But I want to stress very strongly, nobody is acclimated to 115, 118 degrees.
More troublesome is the fact that the low temperatures...
Melissa Guardaro is an extreme heat researcher at Arizona State University.
Have there been in Phoenix hospitals a rise in admissions?
Absolutely. The most number of hospital admissions for heat stress that we've ever had.
What can you tell us about the ways your life changes during a heat wave like this?
So you don't work out outdoors at 11 o'clock. You go and you hike at 5 or 6 o'clock in the morning. I actually have mittens in my car so that when the steering wheel gets really hot, I put my mittens on and that's how I drive.
You know you're living in a hot place when you have to keep oven mitts in your glove compartment.
Yeah, probably not in the glove compartment because you can't touch the metal tab.
So why has so much of the country been scorching for so long? Well, allow me to introduce that breakout weather term of 2023, the heat dome. It's an area of high pressure way up high that traps the warm air like the lid on a pot. It traps the heat, it stops rain from moving in to cool us off, and it just sits there. Unfortunately, not every area under the heat dome suffers equally. You want to know who gets the worst of it?
Cities. Cities are where heat comes to stay and comes to live.
Becca Benner is a director of climate issues at the nonprofit Nature Conservancy.
Cities on average are several degrees warmer than the surrounding areas, and just because of so much pavement, it tends to absorb heat better and reflect heat better.
They call it the urban heat island effect. Too much pavement, not enough trees and greenery to cool things off.
The heat island effect is worst in the poorer areas of our cities where there aren't many trees, and even the bus stops don't always offer shade.
Carlos Galvez lives in Phoenix without air conditioning, electricity, or even running water. The thermometer on his wall registers 109.
Are you able to sleep in this heat?
If I sleep for half an hour, then I'll lie awake for an hour after that because it's just so hot.
Do you have some tricks to stay cool in here?
I drink a lot of water, and twice a day I pour a bucket of water on myself, and I just try to rest in the evening.
In Phoenix, you can get free transportation to the city's 90 cooling centers.
More hot for me, more hot this summer.
But ever since he collapsed from the heat, Galvis is worried about leaving his house.
I'm afraid I could faint again if I go out during the day, so I wait till the sun is going down to go out to get ice or water.
Even for people who have air conditioning, not everyone can afford to use it. The average bill for AC in Phoenix is over $450 a month.
We have a group of people who have to make very difficult choices. Do I pay for air conditioning or do I pay for my rent? This kind of heat wave is bringing up all the chinks in the infrastructure.
President Biden announced some small steps toward adapting to dangerous heat, like expanding access to drinking water, improving weather forecasts, and setting up a heat alert system.
We should be protecting workers from hazardous conditions, and we will.
But Guardaro maintains that there's much more to be done. City planners should develop heat infrastructure, like cooling centers and strategic greenery, and the federal government should start taking heat as seriously as it treats other climate disasters.
FEMA has never declared extreme heat as a disaster.
Wait. So flooding and hurricane, all those things can be designated federal disaster areas, but not heat?
Not heat. Standing up more cooling centers, providing greater services for people. No, that is not reimbursed by the government because there has never been a FEMA extreme heat declared disaster.
Which climate crisis disaster kills the most people?
Extreme heat is the climate disaster that kills the most people. In fact, it kills more people than all of the other disasters combined. And we kind of have a joke here that we show a picture of before a heat wave and then we show a picture after a heat wave and it's the same picture. And that's part of the problem because people see tornadoes and houses are upended and hurricanes and trees and utility poles, and it's this invisible killer.
So it sounds like heat among the various climate disasters does not get enough love from the media and the government.
It absolutely does not get enough love.
Of course, heat waves aren't the only result of the warming planet. Heat also dries out vegetation, and we get fires. Heat evaporates the land, so we get droughts. Heat evaporates the oceans, so we get hurricanes. The Nature Conservancy's Becca Benner cautions us not to think of this summer's heat as something freakish and rare. It's the new normal.
It is no longer a future threat. We are living this now. So whether your basement just flooded, whether you just had to evacuate for a fire, whether it's too hot for you to go outside and enjoy yourself, that means we are now experiencing some of the impacts of climate change. We have to reduce emissions, and we have to do it immediately and faster.
When we come back, why some insurance companies are bailing on disaster-prone states. As we mentioned earlier, 24 natural disasters in the U.S. this year have each been responsible for more than $1 billion in damages. Now several insurance companies have had enough. They're either drastically raising premiums or dropping coverage completely. I spoke with homeowners being impacted by these changes.
It's just a magical place to live.
Mary Morse was drawn to this Southern California mountain town 17 years ago by the pine trees surrounding her home.
I had no idea it was going to end up being an issue.
Her insurance company came to see them as fuel for a wildfire.
I got a letter from my insurance company that said we're not going to serve your area anymore.
They're basically dropping you.
Yep.
Wildfire is now the fastest growing natural disaster in the U.S. In the next 30 years, the average number of buildings destroyed is expected to nearly double, causing $24 billion in damages. Several major insurance companies are no longer writing new policies in California or pulling out of the market altogether.
They're looking at it and saying, listen, we've done the math.
Matthew Eby is CEO of First Street Foundation, which studies climate risks. Its new report shows 6.7 million properties in the U.S. have been pushed onto expensive state-created plans known as insurers of last resort, after private insurers dropped them, in part because of escalating climate risk. Are we one strategically placed hurricane or one massive megafire away from some of these state-backed plans collapsing?
Absolutely. All it takes is one big event in a high concentrated area, and you will see financial collapse of those programs.
That's a real fear in hurricane-prone Florida. Its state-created plan now insures nearly 1.4 million high-risk properties. Florida has the highest insurance rates in the nation, averaging $6,000 a year.
I hate to say it, but it is legalized extortion.
Jack Anderson and his husband Kevin live in Key West. The disaster premiums on their modest home were heading towards $8,000 a year, so they paid off their entire mortgage to avoid having to carry that insurance.
How much did you put towards paying that off?
Just over $250,000. It's like, what level of risk can you live with, I guess is really what it comes down to.
They are now saving for that inevitable rainy day. But as climate impacts grow, so do the risks. For more stories like these and live coverage of breaking news 24/7, stream us right here on CBS News, available across all platforms. Thanks for watching Protecting the Planet. I'm Ben Tracy.